Let's dig a little bit more into Zendesk and ClickUp. They're both in a very competitive market. Zendesk was a Valley darling and then did quite well in the public markets as well, where you have spent most of your time while they were public before being taken private. ClickUp seems to continue to kill it. From your vantage point of a finance and strategy professional, how do you dissect the positioning of each of these companies in their respective spaces? If you have specific sort of thoughts on that, maybe we'll start with Zendesk first.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, Zendesk was always interestingly placed in the market because they were kind of a first mover in many ways, at least a very early mover in the customer support software space. And they use that to good advantage. I mean, they're a huge player in that space. But they ended up navigating into this position of sort of being the mid-market company, where Salesforce is very much the enterprise company. And then there's, frankly, like 1,000 companies that are, at the lower end in the SMB space, Freshworks being one of the biggest of them, Intercom, being another big one. And then there's just a lot there. And so, we ended up saying at Zendesk, thinking through this with them in many cases as a leader in their finance and strategy team, that we needed to really consider our place in the market. We had to, nail down a niche and, try to build from there, but like really win somewhere. And what we usually came back to was, well, SMB is, not as big of a TAM as we really need. And there's a million players in that TAM, and it's just not going to be easy to have a massive market share there. So it can't be SMB. Enterprise is really enticing, but, not only do you have Salesforce, but you also have a lot of other platforms out there, even like solutions from like Twilio had something that, was kind of competing with us. We use them for voice, but then they started to actually kind of pull some customers over on that front with some capabilities that they had. And, there's just a bunch of other ServiceNow, various other pieces of software that started to compete in various ways on the enterprise side. And we also just didn't really invest, I think, as much as we needed to in enterprise to become one of those, key enterprise players on the customer support side. And so we said, while we were considering this whole enterprise thing and frankly, kind of half doing it, we said, okay, well, our sweet spot is mid-market. And we really did well there. We were like the best player in mid-market, I think, pretty objectively. I mean, we had huge market share. We were winning a lot of deals, good win rates. And then the story just became one of kind of like a question mark over time at Zendesk of, okay, do we really break into enterprise and how are we going to beat all of the other folks who are up in enterprise? Or do we go kind of curveball with our next move and think about either like our CRM tool? We had one we called Sell that was from an acquired company that was competing also with Salesforce, on their CRM side. And we could become kind of like an SMB mid-market, HubSpot competitor CRM if we wanted to. Or we ended up having this kind of concept of becoming a customer intelligence platform. And that's where the failed Momentive acquisition came in. And that was, just, again, one of these, opportunities to diversify what we were doing, innovate, and try to leap ahead of competitors by, going in a different direction. And candidly, I'd say that it just failed. I mean, the Momentive acquisition itself was rejected by shareholders. And, since the company was acquired by private equity, the CEO has left. And so it's like, not that the company itself has overall, failed. It's still going. It's still great customer support software. But it was, kind of like a failing to reach the next level, I would say. They kind of tapped out there in the mid-market, and they'll probably continue to be kind of a mid-market player for a very long time, is my expectation.
Got it. What about the ClickUp side of the house? They are, I think, intensely competitive horizontal market with tons of people coming in from various different shapes and sizes.
So the ClickUp story is an interesting one. They are a young company still, and they've just done an incredible job of breaking into the productivity software market. That's what attracted me to them. It's this incredibly splintered, competitive market that is, hard to consider an enterprise market. Technically they're enterprise customers, but, do they need this software? They're going to use this software. There's a lot of kind of like existential questions around it. and they've still managed to thrive. They've got some really big customers. They've got tons of customers across SMB and mid-market, and they have some pretty clear differentiation in their capabilities versus the other main competitors. The other competitors that we looked at when we were there were mostly Monday.com, the most obvious one. Asana was absolutely up there and a very strong competitor. And then we looked at things like, especially Atlassian's Jira kind of Confluence capabilities as you might call it a secondary competitor, but still a very like significant competitor around certain capabilities of the platform. And the way we're starting to see the market shape up was that ClickUp was able to beat the competition in the low end of the market a lot of the time because we had great branding and great ease of use. And we also introduced a lot of features before these other companies, and they ended up copying ClickUp. And so ClickUp is it's innovative, I feel, as a company in the space. And that was, a huge part of what attracted people to it. Where ClickUp struggles is around like bugginess and refinedness of the platform. It is just young, it's not refined yet, and we've prioritized features to some extent over some of the foundations of the platform. I think they're really getting that under control now. Like reliability is better. A lot of the bugs are fixed. A lot of the capabilities are more well-rounded. But that's been their story of being innovative, but just not quite like refined because of their youth. But I would also say, even as they're now focusing on getting their foundation shored up, they're starting to lose a little bit, candidly, on the innovation side. It's like you can't have both. And so you see Monday.com and Asana, ClickUp, a lot of these other tools starting to all look the same. Most of the capabilities are starting to become very similar as they all reach some semblance of maturity, and they copy each other whenever one of them has a good idea. And so it's becoming a little bit more like a commoditized market, which is part of the reason that I decided to move on. I don't mean to say that ClickUp does not still have a compelling story ahead of it. I think there's enough room in that market for all of them to be very successful. But for any of them to become the next $100 billion company, they're going to need to do something that is not the same as everybody else. They're going to need to become more niche. One of them is going to have to displace Atlassian as the tool that you go to, the company that you go to for developer productivity software, for example, for them to really break into a many tens or $100 billion opportunity. Maybe it's a ServiceNow market too. Maybe they get into IT CRM. Maybe there's markets like Coupa, procurement. Like there's a lot of great workflow stuff you can do inside of these software suites. But I think when it's just seen as like the project management tool, there's a limited market there actually, and a lot of competitors in the space that are all starting to look pretty similar and have most of the features that you need for that. There's only so many features you can build for project management. So I see that as a potential limiter for them, and that's the next chapter of their story is like what is their differentiator? Can they continue to have one?